Spain is burning again. And this time, the flames did not start deep in some empty forest, far away from people. They came dangerously close to homes, roads, schools, and neighborhoods on the edge of Murcia. In just hours, a wildfire ripped through the hills around Los Gares and Lages, near the protected natural area of El Valle Carrascoy. Thick smoke rose above the mountain slopes. Emergency calls flooded in. Roads were closed. Fire crews rushed toward the flames. Helicopters and aircraft were brought in, and families were told to leave before the fire could push any closer. By the time the worst of it was contained, around 177 hectares had burned. That is about 437 acres. And roughly 200 people were forced out as a safety measure while crews fought to stop the fire from reaching homes. This was not just another summer warning. This was not just a heatwave headline. This was a real wildfire, burning real land, forcing real people to leave their homes and pushing Spanish emergency crews into a race against time. And the question now is simple. How did a fire in Murcia move so fast, get so close to homes, and burn hundreds of acres before it was finally brought under control? The fire broke out on Tuesday afternoon around the area of Los Gares and Lages in the municipality of Murcia. At first, it looked like another dangerous hillside fire. But within a short time, the situation became much more serious. The flames were burning through pine and scrubland near the regional park of El Valle and Carrascoy, an area where dry vegetation, steep terrain, and heat can quickly turn a small fire into a major emergency. People nearby saw smoke climbing over the hills. Then came the emergency calls. More than 200 calls reportedly came into the emergency services as residents watched the fire spread across the mountain area. That tells you how visible and alarming this fire was from the very beginning. This was not a hidden fire discovered hours later. People could see it. People could smell it. People knew quickly that something was wrong. The danger was not only the size of the fire, it was the direction. The flames were moving close enough to homes that authorities could not wait and hope for the best. Evacuations began as a precaution. Around 200 people were moved out, and about 50 homes were affected by the evacuation order. Think about that moment. You are inside your house. Maybe you are eating, working, resting, or watching the smoke outside the window. Then the warning comes. You need to leave. Not tomorrow, not later. Now. You do not know if your house will still be safe when you return. You do not know if the fire will jump a road. You do not know if the wind will change. You just leave. That is the part most headlines miss. A wildfire is not only acres and smoke. It is people standing in doorways, wondering what they can carry and what they have to leave behind. The fire was burning in a difficult place. The Sierra de Carrascoy El Valle area is not flat, easy ground. It has slopes, uneven terrain, and areas that are hard for ground crews to reach. That makes firefighting slower and more dangerous. When a fire burns in steep or rugged land, crews cannot simply drive up to every flame. Some areas must be attacked from the air. Others need teams working carefully on foot. And all the while, the fire keeps feeding on dry brush, trees, and heat. Murcia was also dealing with intense temperatures. Reports said the area had been under severe heat, with temperatures around 40 degrees Celsius. That kind of heat matters because it dries vegetation, stresses firefighters, and helps flames spread faster. A fire on a cool, calm day is dangerous. A fire in dry heat near homes is a different kind of threat. That is why the response grew so quickly. Authorities activated emergency levels under the regional wildfire plan. Firefighters, forest brigades, police, civil protection teams, and emergency personnel were sent in. The military emergency unit, known as the UME, was also mobilized. Aircraft joined the operation, including helicopters and water-dropping planes. At one point, more than 300 people were involved in the response, according to regional reporting. Later reports said the wider operation involved more than 600 personnel between forest brigades, firefighters, military crews, technicians, and other emergency teams. That scale matters. You do not mobilize that many people for a small grass fire. You do it when the fire is moving fast, the terrain is difficult, and homes are close enough to be in danger. The most critical front was the one nearest the houses. That was the line crews had to hold. Because if that front pushed forward, this story could have changed from a wildfire emergency into a neighborhood disaster. Emergency workers focused on protecting homes, controlling the perimeter, and preventing the fire from jumping into populated areas. Roads near the affected zone were closed. Access routes like the climb toward Cresta del Gallo were restricted. Public movement had to be controlled so crews could work and residents would not enter dangerous zones. The fire also threatened daily life in a very direct way. A school, the Antonio Diaz Public School, was close enough to the danger zone that it became part of the concern. Local reports said the flames came close to homes and infrastructure, including that school area. That detail makes the story feel different, because it was not only a wildfire in the hills, it was a wildfire close enough to touch the normal life of a town. Homes, roads, schools, neighborhoods, the places people use every day. By nightfall, the pressure increased. Firefighters often say nighttime can be both a challenge and an opportunity. Temperatures may drop, and humidity may rise, which can help slow flames. But visibility becomes worse. Working in rough terrain becomes more dangerous. And if the wind shifts in the dark, crews have less time to react. In Murcia, the night was tense. Military crews and emergency teams worked through the night to keep the flames from reaching homes. The UME brought in personnel and vehicles. Ground teams tried to secure the edge of the fire. Air support returned when conditions allowed. By Wednesday, there was some relief. Officials said the most dangerous front, the one closest to homes, had been contained. The fire was evolving more favorably. Some residents who had been evacuated were allowed to return to their houses. But the fire was still not something to ignore. Even when a wildfire is stabilized, that does not mean it is dead. Hot spots can flare again. Wind can push embers across a line. Dry vegetation can reignite. Crews still have to patrol the perimeter, soak burning material, and watch for new outbreaks. That is why a large number of crews remained in place even after the immediate threat was reduced. By Thursday, reports said the fire had been brought under control and the emergency alert level was lowered. The UME began withdrawing from the area after the situation improved. But the damage was already clear. 177 hectares burned. A perimeter of nearly 8 kilometers affected. Protected land scorched. Hundreds of people mobilized. Around 200 residents forced out. And a whole community reminded how quickly a hot afternoon can turn into an emergency. The biggest damage was not rows of homes destroyed. Authorities said the threat to homes was eventually stopped. That is important, because this fire could have been much worse. But do not confuse homes saved with nothing happened. A wildfire burning 437 acres near a residential area is not nothing. A protected natural park burning is not nothing. Hundreds of emergency workers being deployed is not nothing. Families being evacuated from their homes is not nothing. Roads closed, aircraft deployed, military assistance requested, and the highest levels of local emergency response activated. That is a serious wildfire event, and it happened before the deepest part of summer. That is what should make people pay attention. Because Spain is only entering the hotter, drier stretch of the year. If a fire like this can move so fast in early June, what happens when the land gets even drier, the heat lasts longer, and winds become less predictable? This is the uncomfortable question hanging over Murcia now. Was this one dangerous fire, or was it a preview? Across southern Europe, wildfire seasons have become more dangerous in recent years. Heat arrives earlier, dry vegetation builds up, rural areas change. Abandoned fields and unmanaged land become fuel. Cities and towns expand closer to natural areas, and when a spark appears, the fire has more places to run. In Murcia, reports pointed to dry vegetation and the rugged hillside as key problems. Some reporting also noted that authorities were investigating the origin of the fire, and there were concerns that it may not have been purely accidental. That part is important, but it must be handled carefully. At this stage, the confirmed story is the damage and the response. The fire burned hundreds of acres. It forced evacuations. It mobilized firefighters, aircraft, and military support. The cause should be left to investigators. But whether it was human negligence, deliberate action, or another trigger, the result was the same for the people nearby. Smoke in the sky, flames on the hillside, and the order to get out. That is why wildfires are so terrifying. They do not need much time to change everything. 1 hour, it is smoke on the hill. The next hour, emergency vehicles are blocking roads. Then helicopters are overhead. Then families are packing bags. Then the mountain behind the town is glowing orange. A wildfire does not ask if the community is ready. It just moves. And in Murcia, it moved fast enough to force a full emergency response. For firefighters, the battle was about speed and containment. The first goal was stopping the fire from reaching homes. The second was securing the perimeter. The third was preventing reactivation. That last part is where the public often stops paying attention too early. Once headlines say controlled or stabilized, people assume it is over. But for crews on the ground, the fire remains dangerous until the hot spots are fully handled. That is why, even after the situation improved, teams stayed behind to watch the burned area and prevent flare-ups. Because with wildfires, the second wave can be just as dangerous as the first. A gust of wind can find a hot spot, a hidden ember can wake up, a small line of smoke can become another fire. So while evacuated residents were able to return, the burned land still needed watching. The damage also raises another issue: protected natural spaces. The El Valle Carrascoy area is not just empty land on a map. It is part of a natural environment that holds wildlife, vegetation, trails, landscape, and identity for the region. When 407 acres burn in or near a protected area, the scars can remain long after the smoke disappears: blackened trees, ash-covered soil, damaged habitat, erosion risk when rain comes. A changed landscape. Fire is natural in some ecosystems, but modern wildfires near communities and protected zones can become more intense and more damaging than the land can easily absorb. And when the fire burns close to neighborhoods, the emotional damage spreads beyond the forest. People remember the smoke, they remember the order to leave, they remember the sound of aircraft. They remember watching the hill burn and wondering whether the flames would stop in time. That memory stays. The Murcia fire also shows how fast a local emergency can become a national response. First, local firefighters move in. Then regional emergency plans activate. Then aircraft are requested. Then the UME is called. Then hundreds of personnel are working through the night. All because the fire crossed from visible smoke into serious threat. That is the line every wildfire community fears. And once that line is crossed, the situation becomes a race against wind, a race against heat, a race against terrain, a race against nightfall, a race to stop the flames before they reach the first home. In Murcia, emergency teams won the most important battle. They kept the fire from becoming a residential catastrophe. But the cost was still heavy. 437 acres burned, people forced out, protected land damaged, hundreds of responders deployed, and a region reminded that wildfire season does not wait for the calendar to say summer. Now, as crews withdraw and residents return, the story enters its next stage. Investigators will look at the cause. Authorities will review the response. Crews will monitor the land. Residents will check their homes and neighborhoods. And Spain will keep watching the weather, because this may not be the last fire of the season. That is the real warning. Not fear, not exaggeration. A real warning written in smoke and burned land. Murcia's wildfire did not destroy a city, but it did show how close disaster can come. It showed how fast 437 acres can burn. It showed how quickly 200 people can be forced out. It showed how a quiet hillside can turn into a wall of smoke. And it showed that when heat, dry vegetation, and wind meet near homes, there is no such thing as a small fire. Spain's wildfire season has started with a dangerous message. Murcia was lucky the flames were stopped before they reached homes. But luck is not a fire plan. And if this is what early June looks like, the question now is not whether Spain will face more fires. The question is where the next one will start, and whether crews will get there before the flames reach the people.